Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much to everybody who come to our session today. Today we have very important session, and before I begin, let me introduce myself to make you understand what is going on today. My name is
Yes, look, we have a very enthusiastic panel who are starting literally 1 minute before time, so I'm impressed. First of all, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the final day, final session of MOCAfest. I think those of you who have been attending from the first day would agree that this has been an extremely vibrant, out of sight, out of mind experience. We've seen some phenomenal talent, both vocal and visual. We've had some great conversations, some beautiful classes, and it's almost as if the piece de resistance has been left to the end, because we have some great panel discussions today, interviews, and we'll have some performances as well. So, the fantastic experience just continues. This morning's panel discussion is entitled Reviving Jawi Script Through Contemporary Arts. We have an esteemed panel here of professionals. We have Dr. Mohammed Zaini Othman. Dr. Othman, Yes, Dr. Othman. Now, Dr. Othman is the director of the Center for Advanced Studies on Islam, Science and Civilization in Malaysia. We have Mohammed Shukri. Mohammed is the founder and director of Classica Media, Jawi Academy Script Malaysia. We have Ruh Al-Alam. Ruh, many of you will have seen him, renowned graphic artist and calligrapher from the UK. And last but not least, being interviewed, we have El Cid. El Cid is, again, the world-renowned calligraphist. Is that? You know, we'll let him explain exactly what it is that he does, but it is spectacular, and we'll be seeing what El Cid is producing later on today, as well as discussing and fleshing out this interesting topic that is being moderated by Professor Dr. Tatiana Denisova. Did I pronounce that correctly? And she is the professor of the Center for Advanced Studies on Islam, Science and Civilization from Russia. So it's quite an international mix. It's a great cohort of skills, expertise and experience to discuss this issue, and I'm hoping there'll be time for some questions and answers as well from you. So thank you for attending, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Half of my work already done. So anyway, I would like to explain to you why the session regarding the JavaScript is so much important, and why this session make us come together today. People from very different background, yeah? From science, from Islamic science, from visual art, from artistic background, and so on. Nowadays, JavaScript, you know what is Jawi is, yeah? This is a Malay language in Arabic script. It's already more than 1,000 years old, yeah? And created by prominent scholars and missionaries who come here to spread Islam and new knowledge over here. JavaScript become basis of contemporary and classical Malay language, and this language is one of the biggest language in Muslim world. Yeah, and JavaScript have a lot of different function. It used to be used as a language of Islam and religion, the language of da'wah, the language of science, language of visual art, calligraphy. With this JavaScript, a lot of most beautiful Quranic books was illuminated. Yeah, we even here have our own Malay style in Quran design, illuminating of Quranic manuscripts. Yeah, and that is why today you have here people who is from scientific area and also from artist area. So as I understand you, I not need to introduce you again, yeah, because this our beautiful lady did it already, my job. So let me not to waste time and give our panelists chance to talk about what they want to share with you. Who want to begin? Prof, okay.
I will use the,
Okay.
because I have some slides to show. All right, thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good morning. Let's hope that technology doesn't, fail us this morning, unless it didn't have a very nice, good sleep last night. Last night concert was very nice. Did you all attended it? Artists, they need to dream. They let other artists do the work, yeah? Oh, you were in the plane. Anyways, myself, Shukri is my student, and Professor Tatiana is my colleague. We are from this UTM, Kuala Lumpur, University Technology, Malaysia. We are right, I think, about 10 minutes away from here. That's why when Najmia, and I must congratulate Najmia, I think it was Shukri who suggested that she got in touch with me, and we talked over the phone, and then I said, yeah, it's nice for us to meet. You want me to get involved in this? I want to know what it's all about. And she walked into my office, and then she said, I know you. You're my teacher. We haven't met for many, many years. So anyways, right now, I used to be at IIU, the International Islamic University, now at the University Technology Malaysia, CASIS. We Center for Advanced Studies of Islam and Science and Civilization is based on the idea of Professor Said Naqib al-Attas, who's a giant in Islamic thought, contemporary Islamic thought. People as far-flung as America, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, would come and listen to him. And recently, Hamza Yusuf bought about 100 copies of that book, Prolegomena to the Metaphysics of Islam. It will be used in Zaytuna as a text. It is a text that's now acquiring a lot of interest among young people like yourself. This is what we do every Saturday night. It's a Saturday night lecture, but we call it, or dubbed it, Saturday Night Live, CASI style. This is what I want to show you. Professor Tatiana mentioned about Jawi. It has been more about 1,000 years here. We're not speaking of the air. We have an artifact. It's called the Terengganu inscription. The real shebang is there. You can find in the museum in Terengganu. It was hosted in the Museum of Singapore for a long time before Malaysia has its own national museum. Once the National Museum was completed, it was transported back from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur. Then Terengganu, the place where this inscription was found, request for it to be returned home. And now it is home. This is one of the oldest Jawi artifacts we have in the world. So much so that it is now recorded as UNESCO Register of Memory of the World, or something to that effect. It is an edict because it is an edict written at the proclamation by the, well, today we call it Sultan, but the powers that be at that time. It's very difficult to decipher what it is, what the rank is called, either the king or the Sultan or what have you. You have in this text a mix of Sanskrit, a mix of Arabic, Persian languages. And you can see this is a very old style, but what is interesting is that the date, do we have a pointer? I asked for a pointer. Did we get a pointer? Oh, fancy stuff. See, when you give fancy stuff to professors, they're lost. This is This is the name of the place. Ta, Ra, Nun, Kaf, Alif, Nun, Waw, Terengganu. There are absence of dots because as any artist who wants to carve on a piece of stone, you must know the nature of a stone. This is a dolerite stone, which is local of Kuala Berang, Terengganu. Accidentally, it's also the place where I was born. And it is not coming from India or China, because people thought that Islam came from either India or China to this part of the world. And there you go. It's a proof that the stone is local, and therefore the craftsman was also local, because you must know the nature of the stone. And they have done all the dating of this, taking it to nuclear level and what have you. They found out that this is really bona fide local. What is interesting is that when you see this, generally in the Malay context today, when you see Jawi, you think it's religious. It is a proclamation of the Sultan saying what are the rules to be enacted when it comes to misdeeds pertaining to sexual acts, theft, people who didn't pay your debt. Basically, it is proclamation of Sharia. And this is dated in Malay 702, 702 Hijrah, which makes it 1303. Professor Latas rediscovered, or actually discovered the actual date, because it is mentioned here that this edict was erected on the first Friday. That's the word Jum'ah there, Jim, Mim, Ain, Ta, Marbuta, Jum'ah, and it's mentioned in the month Rajab, Ra, Jim, Ba, and in the year Sharatan. So you have technical terms coming from the Arabic world, from the Muslim world, from the Islamic world, being used in the Malay world right as early as 1303, Christian era, which is more than 700 years ago. Remember, 1303, it is 150 years earlier than Nicholas Copernicus. The Malay in this part of the world understood Sharatan. Sharatan is a name of a constellation in the sky. When you translate it into contemporary parlance of astronomy, it is Aries. So can you imagine the Sultan or the king or whoever that may be at that time said, I want this edict to be erected on the first Friday in the month of Rajab, and the moon is in the constellation of Sharatan. Yay, they didn't have a computer. How did they do that? So the science of astronomy was amazing. Amazing indeed, so much so that Professor Latas calculated by hand, and he came out, he thought, 22nd of February, 1303. And he wrote a book which I translated into Malay. That's the book. So what I did, as a person trained in physics and astronomy at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, hey, we should just plug these numbers in a computer software to see whether this old professor did it rightly or not. So we did. And we did, I and a colleague did, and this is what we found. The moon is in the constellation of Sharatan. The date, 1303, February 22nd. It's amazing, isn't it? 700 years of data is kept, and it is precise to the computation of computer that was developed 2010. Muslim astronomers. And why Muslim astronomers are so good? Because we use observation every day. And people still make fun about, hey, whether we should make use with calculation or observation for Ramadan, for Eid. They forgot one thing. Astronomers, physicists, engineers use one rule of thumb. Observation is for the verification of calculation. And that is why astronomers do send, even until now, American researchers send rovers to Mars. Why? They actually want to know what's going on in Mars. It's not just enough to calculate stuff. So Professor Latas not only found the right date, but he was the man very, very instrumental in reviving the interest of Jawi in the Malay, I should say Malaysia. Because in the 70s, the government decided to do away with Jawi and make use of Rumi, but he pushed on and spoke to the public and the intellectuals here that the need of maintaining a certain degree of understanding or familiarity with Jawi, because he himself is a calligrapher. This is one of his examples. This is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, drawn in the form of a rooster. Because in the Malay world, he said, we asked him, Professor Latas, why did you draw in the form of a rooster? He said, because in the Malay world, we awake every morning, it's the sound of this that wakes people up. And I say, the Muslim must be reminded of this, and they should be reminded by Bismillah, to begin everything with Bismillah. And this is another example. And recently, he published a new book, which will be sold, I think, in a couple of months. And this is, he said, he gave it the name, the fish Noon, as it is in the Quran, Noon wal qalami wa ma yasturun. So very interesting stuff. I mean, there are other panels who's going to talk about the discipline of Jawi script and what have you, but this is an example of how malleable is Jawi, that you can put in, science, literature, legal, and here is a wonderful thing. For Sufis, this is a very mystical symbol, the fish, swimming in the sea of ocean of God's knowledge. So with that, I leave you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for very interesting and encouraging information and the speech. And I would like to ask our panelists to continue the talk. Who will be the next one? Up to you. Okay, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The organizers, my beloved professors. Actually, I'm very grateful because two of my teachers are over here. So perhaps if I do some mistake, they can easily correct me over here. Yeah, Alhamdulillah. I would like to talk three things. One is why the Malay use Jawi. Second, why we left Jawi. And third is how do we revive it again. First one, why the Malay use Jawi in the first place? Because Malay became Muslim and they adopted all the Islamic intellectual heritage into their civilization. And primarily the Quran as the basis of our intellectual heritage. So following from that, the Malay was influenced heavily with the Quran, especially in the terms of language. They also adopted the key terms. For example, in Malay we have the term Allah, Nabi, Rasul, Ilmu, Adil, Sahabat, and many more. And then following from that, we also adopted Arabic as our language of reference for our grammar and also for our writing script. So that's why the Jawi came into place for more than 1,000 of years. And then suddenly, back in early 1900, there were a shift of thinking. Apart from that is because of colonization. Malay world, like we often said, is not only Malaysia, but it is also consists with Indonesia as well. So in Indonesia, the Dutch colonized Indonesia for more than 600 years. And then suddenly they decided that the Romanized script as the official script of Netherlands East Indies at that time. So suddenly, in one night, most of Indonesians are illiterate because previously they used Arabic or Jawi script to write for their intellectual purpose, intellectual works, and then they just abandoned that script due to that addiction. Apart from that, from the local people as well, what happened was the local people thought using the Arabic or Jawi script was very old-fashioned. So they want to progress, they want to develop, they want to follow modernism, the Western modernism. So they were propagating the slogan to follow the West, adopt the West directly, without doing some filtration or anything else. So they just adopt the script and then they transfer their language, the Malay language, into the the newly script, which is we call it Rumi over here, or the Latin script. So the change started in Indonesia, and then in around 1970s, 1950 to 1970s, the influence came to Malaysia. So over here, luckily the Malaysian changed the script quite a little bit late. So that's why we have some literate people who still can read Jawi script until to this day. But in contrast to Indonesian, unfortunately they don't. So that's what is happening now. So my third part is how do we revive this? Now we have, there are two views that we have to bear in mind. First, all the Jawi script is in the works of 50 or 100 years before us. So it is not recent, it is not up to date. All the knowledge is historical knowledge. That's one view we have to bear in mind. Second one, the current script that we are using here, the Romanized script, is already very developed and being used widely, and also it is the basis of our technological advancement today, because all the computers are using the Latin script, right, to write the coding and all stuff. And then based on that two views, we have to realize the reality of if we want to revive Jawi script. So to do that is, what we do with the current generation is to educate them, to give the worldview to them that the previous Jawi script, previous Jawi intellectual work, or the previous work of our scholars is important in terms of giving the identity, in terms of giving the meaning of life, in terms of guiding them to be a better person. So on that perspective, so we can try to enhance Jawi literacy or the previous scripts literacy to them in order for them to read more about the Jawi works or the previous works. I think that's all for now for me.
Thank you very much, Sukri, for very interesting information. Let's our panelists finish, and after we will discuss what we wanted to discuss, and after that you will ask. You are free and most welcome to ask the question. Yeah.
We even have enthusiastic audience.
That is very good. Yeah, that is a miracle of our subject today. Yeah. So right now you was listening some information about the scientific and intellectual part of calligraphy and JavaScript. Now I would like to introduce you our two panelists who is more to the artistic and visual art area. Yeah. So please continue talk. I don't know who from you. Okay. Mr. Ruh, yeah, okay.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Ruh, and I'm from the UK. I mean, there's a lot that you've heard about the Jawi script, and I think I come from a different experience where, as an artist from the UK, where we don't have any Arabic anywhere other than obviously in museums, and in the Muslim community there is Arabic, obviously, but or the use of Arabic script. So. In day-to-day life, there isn't any use of it in sort of normative world in the UK anyway. But what's interesting, what I found interesting, is both with the history of Jawi and in some other countries, such as Turkey, there's a really interesting scenario what happened there, where Turkey went through a process where suddenly with Ataturk, he abolished and the use of Arabic script for the Turkish language, and overnight again people became illiterate and they had to pick up a whole new language essentially through the use of the Romanized script, Latin. But what this didn't do was, it didn't mean that they completely lost the calligraphy or the Arabic script. In fact, because the Turks are probably the finest calligraphers in the world, and being non-Arabs as well, they're the finest calligraphers in the world, and they maintain that tradition. They still have schools and classes and masters in calligraphy, and that was a different history for them, and that's quite recent as well, in the last 100 so years. And it's quite different from what happened to the Jawi script, and that's quite understandable. But what I would ultimately like to see, as a calligrapher who's trained in Egypt in the traditional scripts, but I mostly work in developing my own scripts. And what that essentially means is that when I develop my own scripts based on a tradition of calligraphy, I'm seeing it as scripts that have been developed in Britain. So I almost say, and I've been saying recently, that actually these are British Arabic scripts, you know, and I'm not simply saying that they're Islamic. I'm not saying that they're, you know, just Middle Eastern of any kind, but actually something that's local to the UK because it's been developed there and it's got influences from the locality. So my work is heavily influenced by Latin typography, Latin calligraphy, even Japanese. But you know, but the point being is it's developed locally. And what would be amazing to see is a development of Jawi by Malaysian, by locals, in a style. I mean, both the traditional script, you know, being adopted again and written again in the finest hand possible. I'm not saying it should look like thuluth or riqa or naskh. I would like to see it looking like what people interpret as Jawi, right? And then develop that even further. And I would love to see variations of Jawi in many different script styles. And you know, there's a process for that. Naturally, you need to have studied both traditional scripts in our existing scripts in the world that are quite popular, from Diwani, Naskh, you know, Riqa, and you know, Thuluth, you know, to mention a few. But you know, because they do give foundation, but also possibly modern typography. And with the advent of technology in the most recent era of digital, you know, form, I think we've got the advantage that calligraphy can be still adapted with the right sort of programming to work. I believe that the printing press was a bit difficult even with Arabic, and that's why the adoption of the printing press was quite late as well, because the thing was, with calligraphers always thought that the printing press could never match their hand calligraphy, and that's one of the big reasons why they hated the printing press, and probably also why they didn't, you know, further in terms of technology as they could have in the Muslim world. But now we've got technology that is programmable quite easily, and you can do that locally. So I think there's multiple facets, multiple angles, and I would love to see young Malaysians, you know, picking up on this, developing it, learning the script, but not as just purely a religious thing or thinking that it's something old. You know, it's gonna serve multiple different areas, because we've got history where we know that, you know, Arabic has been used by multiple different societies, and you know, people with different backgrounds and culture. And I think today I was listening to Professor here, who was saying that, well, the Jews used to write in Arabic script. They used to write Hebrew in Arabic script. You know, it's very, very normal to have seen that. And El-Cid was mentioning that you had to learn, or as a prerequisite, you know, to know Arabic in order to actually be in universities at one point, and to learn medicine, and you know, to be in Oxford, you know, for particular sciences. So it should be seen, you know, Jawi shouldn't be seen as an Arabic thing, but as something that's, you know, naturally local, because Arabic script happens to be in across the Muslim world. You've got Chinese variation of it, you've got Japanese variations of it. You know, where my parents are from Bangladesh, we've got a Bangladeshi script, which is in Arabic as well. So, you know, everyone's adopting it, but they're developing and changing it ever so slightly. And one of the things you'll notice about Arabic scripts from around the world, that they vary according to the culture. So you've got Andalusi, Kufi, and you've got Kufi from Iraq, and you've got different variations of Thuluth, and they've got Maghrebi script, you know, which is beautiful. You know, you've got scripts in Africa that are very African in nature. So like we have flavors of food, and we've got costumes and architecture, calligraphy does exactly the same thing. It's local, and that's the beauty of Islam in general, isn't it? That it adapts locally, and to have its own identity. So I think I want to see a whole new spectrum of work coming from Malaysia, and you know, it's completely open. You can do almost anything with it, and that's the beauty of it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our last panelist, please, can you contribute also to our talk?
Sure. Assalamu alaikum. My name is El-Cid. I'm an artist mixing calligraphy and graffiti. So there was like some interesting stuff that Shukri and Professor Muhammad and Professor Tatiana and Ruh said. And for me, like reviving the Jawi script is directly connected to the notion of pride. You know, as the as a personal experience, I was born and raised in France, you know, and so my whole life I grew up not really feeling French, and the French people used to tell me like I didn't really feel French. So when I was a teenager, I got this like deep desire to get back to my roots, and so I turned to my Arabic roots. And the first thing to do was to learn the language. So I started learning how to write and read Arabic, and this is how I discovered calligraphy. And back in the days in Paris, I didn't find any teacher who can teach me calligraphy. So I used to take some classical Arabic calligraphy and reproduce them without knowing there was like a lot of rules in it. So it was the rejection of the French community that pushed me to explore actually this part of my identity that I didn't know, and this is how it came about. And then I just started like doing calligraphy and painting, and I used to be in graffiti back in the 90s. So later on, I felt the natural feeling to bring this part of my identity into this. I don't like to say Western, but like hip hop identity, which was graffiti, and this is how it came about, you know. And I believe that if I was born and raised in Tunisia, I would never do what I'm doing today because I wouldn't feel, you know, the desire to get back to it. And I think that today, Malaysian people or anybody around the world, even Iranian people like with Farsi or Pakistani people with Urdu, you know, using the Arabic script has to be like that, you know, like to feel this kind of pride and to get this desire of bring back a tradition like in this modern world, you know. And when Shukri mentioned that earlier, for most of the youth, you know, a couple of years ago and still today, like Arab, like calligraphy is like an old-fashioned thing, you know. So this old man, this workshop writing invitation, you know, like with this old qalam. And so there is nothing fancy about it. And I think with the practice, on my level, I think the practice of graffiti is a language that the youth like understand, like catch more easily, and this is relevant to our time. So the challenge today is to use this tradition that we have, like in calligraphy, wherever you are around the world, and bring it to this to what we have, like I mean, like the modern time. It creates something like relevant to everybody, you know. And I think artists such as Roha, Tixter, or like many around the world, like are part of this, what we call like this kind of Islamic art renaissance that we're trying to push like forward. Yeah, so that's it.
Thank you very much. You know, from all of our 4 panelists, one of the very important idea I got myself, yeah? Actually, one of the very important function of Arabic script, of Arabic calligraphy, is to unify people. And Ruh said a very important thing, that this Arabic script and calligraphy come out from not belong only to some religious area. You know, I'm as a historian, I can see that Arabic script can be seen in Renaissance painting, in Christian icons from Caravaggio or Dürer. You know, when you will see this this design, you can see this using this la ilaha illallah or some Arabic script even in Christian icons, you know. And that is very contemporary thing, because in era of globalization, yeah, Arabic script and calligraphy could be one of the very important part of introduction to each other, to unifying people, yeah? And I would like to ask our panelists and also our public to ask the question and to discuss it. Please, you are welcome. Yeah, please.
No, I'm not going to jump on the stage. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, just want to say it's a huge privilege and it's a great honor to have experts in their field on stage, apart from Rue. You've hacked on there somehow. Like LC said, I'm myself a digital artist. Now I was just thinking, due to like modern technology, a lot of people have now digitized classical scripts, so like two of them and Kufik and stuff. And I was just thinking, could we do like something similar with JavaScript? Actually start making a stock library and actually get the youth, because that's where we need to start, and actually make them love the actual subject or the style. So they're encouraged to like use it in their own designs and stuff. And you know, first get a basic foundation and love for it, or think of like avenues like that and encourage that. I don't know how you feel about that. Sorry, my voice has gone really croaky because I've been speaking to kids for the past week. Go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So that's actually what we did here. We are doing it here right now, until now. Right now, what we actually saw Jawi is not limited to the Malay community only. We can prove it because we used to work with the Japanese. They were computer experts in archiving all the Jawi works. So we discussed, we did some technical discussion to put Jawi works in a context right now. What are the contexts that I want to share? One, Jawi, when we do the digitization, it is in image. So it is cannot be encrypted by the computer. So we have to put a human touch to do the technical stuff behind it. So what we have to do is to do the transliteration of Jawi text. So from that process, we can integrate the Jawi text to the computer. And then from that, it helps the current generation to read, to do the search, browse and search, and then to help them to explore more about the previous ideas. Right, and that's all.
Does anyone actually currently, you know, I mean, what I would love to see is, in terms of digitization, but along that process, that a formal measurement system is developed for the writing of Jawi, right? If it doesn't exist already, and the formal pens and tools that will be used. Because I believe before a digitization process can happen, there needs to be a hand process in place. I'm not sure if that's already happening or not, but if the rule books could be written, you know, the training manuals could be written, I think that would spearhead the develop into digitization eventually, naturally.
If I may interject, there is a foundation here, and it was by, again, a creative effort of an older generation who saw the need to keep this thing alive, this form of JavaScript. They instituted a foundation called Yayasan Restu. And what they did eventually, they turned out into a handwritten center for writing the Quran, the Malay version, with the Malaysian script, using colors made from local vegetation. Fascinating. And from there, they digitized the whole thing, and it has been miniaturized so that you have now the pocket version and have you. So yes, inadvertently you do have the handmade kalams, all the different sizes, and the interesting thing for me is the development of the colors, using local herbs, local green and red and whatever. So this is fascinating. So yes, it is being done. Now, whether a rule book has been developed, I think it probably just along the way. Because this is just like tacit knowledge. It's just let's put this down into a book. Yes.
That's where it starts, and that's the natural process, I believe.
You know, just a small addition, one of the center of digitalizing of Malay written tradition is a British Library also, and they have few digital programs which is about the digitalizing of archive documents, and one of the last of their production is special issue of Indonesia Malay World about the Malay Jawi paleography. They just in this year they publish it, yeah, based on Malay Indonesian World Journal. It's very interesting book, yeah, based on British Library. Thank you. Anything to it? Okay. Yeah, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Recently, there's this American television program called Homeland, which basically has an unapologetic view of Muslims, frames a lot of them as terrorists. Now, you might have heard that they hired some Arabic calligraphy artists to kind of write some things just on set. They didn't really care or pay attention to what the message was. And cleverly, these artists spoke against the program, saying, you know, Homeland is racist, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what my question deals with is how I think with this art form, as it becomes more popular, the producers of Homeland wanted this to kind of give it an authentic feel, but also because they realized the popularity of something like calligraphy. And do you worry about the message getting lost when so many Muslims and non-Muslims don't really understand the script? And is it just about the aesthetic, or is it really how much are we conveying a message as well? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I saw the Homeland thing, and actually they're a friend of mine in Germany. So, yeah. No, not at all. I'm like really proud of them. Seriously, yeah, really. And well, there's like two Egyptian, one Egyptian girl, one Egyptian guy, and one German guy in Dunstan. The idea, you know, like that's true. Like on my work, for example, a lot of people tell me, why don't you write the meaning, you know, under your painting, so we know what you're talking about. You know, we look at it as an abstract piece, but I don't know. When you back in the days, for example, in France, none of us used to speak English, you know, and so we used to listen to this kind of music coming from the U.S., Michael Jackson and all those stuff, and we used to sing those songs. We had no idea of what this guy was talking about, and we loved it. You know, we loved the melody, and we appreciate the music. And I think with Arabic calligraphy, there is a beauty in it that you don't need to translate. You know, like even if you don't understand the meaning, you still can catch. You can still have a feeling, and that's the same thing, I guess. And also, why do you need to translate? You know what I mean? Why do you always feel this kind of complex of having like the superpower? If somebody want to understand, maybe they should like learn, you know, so they can try to decipher, you know. So that's a way like to it's come back to the pride, you know, like you're proud of what you do and what you are, and what should you always look like as a inferior person, and so okay, I need to translate so the big power can understand me. So yeah, hope I answered.
Thank you. Only one small comment. You know, calligraphy have this element of aesthetica, and you can see in history the existence of many epigraphical masterpieces, in which one, for example, Chinese people in their porcelain, this ceramic, they sometimes just follow the pattern of calligraphy without even understanding the meaning. But this aesthetica push you to learn, to understand the meaning. That is the beauty of Arabic calligraphy. Thank you very much. Who have the question, please?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. I have two questions. First, how far we can feel the influence of Malay world tradition, ataupun macam mana kita nak rasa pengaruh daripada tradisi Melayu, sama ada manuskrip ataupun tulisan Jawi dan tamadun Melayu yang lepas. Soalan yang kedua, how much the important and how we can benefit from the discoveries, ataupun sejauh mana pentingnya masyarakat dunia ataupun masyarakat Melayu sendiri untuk mengkaji manuskrip Melayu, dan apa manfaat yang kita boleh dapat daripada itu. Sekian.
Thank you very much. This is for you, I think, yeah.
Well, maybe some others can comment also, because writing is very much an effect of the manuscript. But the first part, the second question, I'll give answer indirectly. The Malay world, which uses Arabic script, and it is known as Jawi, is not a separate world. It is an integral part of the Muslim world. The mother, to use this, the Star Trekish language, the mother spaceship is Arabic itself, the language of Islam. So what happened was, I was wondering also why people study manuscript. When I was studying at the University of Chicago, we had a class on reading Arabic manuscript. A very old piece, one piece of a manuscript. It took us a whole semester to read it. Well, to cut the story short, when I was the curator of the Istaq Library, we wanted to acquire a collection of Arabic manuscripts on medicine. Huge collection and very rich collection. But again, what's the use, what's the point? That has always been the number one question on people who hold the money. And they say, why do you buy old manuscripts? We passed it. And guess who bought the whole collection? It was bought by Wellcome Institute in London. And Wellcome Institute is also the same institute that as they say, by its downstream activities, finally developed something called Drapelin, the medicine for diaper rash. They wanted to go deeper into medicine that is based on herbs. And where do you get this kind of works? The Arabic, apart from the Ayurvedic. There's much to be learned in manuscripts. As I pointed earlier, you find an old quaint word called Sharatan, and it is equivalent to the constellation of Aries. And it points out to the fact that astronomy in the Malay world, 1303, is 150 years earlier than Nicholas Copernicus, and probably another 200 years or so earlier than Galileo Galilei. If you understand a little bit more about scientific revolution, you know how important these two figures are in the history of scientific revolution and Christian world. The two shook the very ground of Christian church. They shifted the center of the universe from geocentric into heliocentric. And guess what? When you read Nicholas Copernicus' work entitled or I should say in Latin, it is De Revolutionibus Orbium Celestium, he mentioned that he owes his data to 3 Muslim scholars, and one of them, Al-Battani, the second one, Ibn Rushd, from the land of Spain and North Africa, the guy who's known to be a very famous faqih. Why? Al-Battani's data was good. Copernicus was 1450 something, 53, he died for more than 800 years, the data was good. In scientific work, data is very important, the trustworthiness of the data. And you can find this work of Copernicus translated and edited by none other than Stephen Hawking in a huge tome. It's called On the Shoulders of Giants. You can read the name very clearly. He uses the data from Battani, from Ibn Rushd, and one more person whose Latin name is so difficult for me to pronounce. There's much wealth to be gained, because human knowledge we develop from what was previously researched, isn't it? Like you guys, you created what is based on earlier limited formal forms of calligraphy. Then you explore new dimensions. And this is what we need now. Unfortunately, many young ones around here today, regardless Malay, Urdu speaking, Arabic speaking, we don't look into our heritage, which is more scientific and knowledge culture. I remember when I was reading Al-Biruni's Istikhraj al-Awtar, which is a small booklet on the collections of theorems from Euclid. And I showed it to a colleague, to a fellow student of mine at the University of Wisconsin, because I was learning Arabic at that time, and he was a student in nuclear engineering. I said, could you please help me with this Arabic? It's so difficult. You know what he said? Zaini, we don't read any more of this old stuff. And that's where we lost, because great universities, I know, I mean, I was in Oxford for 2 years as a visiting fellow. They're still reading our great Muslim scholars in terms of manuscript. Any well-known universities in the world would have a department on reading manuscripts. And they read everything. So the Malay world is an uncharted territory, seriously, because we are the last, I mean, to use again Star Trek language, we are the last frontier in terms of the continent, right? So we hold the treasures of the tropical, verdant gardens that we have here. And very few people go into the books of medicine in terms of that was written in manuscript form here. Not many. And if it were to be studied, it would be studied by people, lo and behold, from England, not from Malaysia. All right? So there's much to be learned. And the Malay world is not only Malaysia and Indonesia, but from the last count, people say it's probably the second largest language in the Muslim world, after Arabic maybe. Or maybe Arabic is a smaller demography, because we have Brunei, Singapore, Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia and Indonesia. You count that. If you, probably bigger than Arabic maybe. It's just that Arabic is a scientific language. There's another point I want to mention. Sorry to a little bit belabor on the time. We forget the fact that there are 4 elements that would bind or unify a people. One is ethnicity, that is the color of the skin. That is physical. I mean, a Chinese born in America and he speaks exactly like an American, he would say, I'm Chinese American, all right, because of the features. The second part is history, a sense of history. Again, the Chinese American would say, I'm an American because I was born here. My history, I've never been to Taiwan, never been to Hong Kong, never been back to the mainland. I'm American, my history is here. The same thing with us Muslim here. Our history is not localized Bangladeshi history. That's just micro history. But you go back to the history of the Muslims, it's the one same person, Adam alayhi salam. It's the history of the prophets. We belong to the same intellectual history, same religious history. So therefore, another element that binds a people is religion. And that is why I was saying earlier, these manuscripts that we have, Malay manuscripts, it's not just to think of it in Malay, but a whole bigger context. Islam is one of the largest religion in the world, if not the second. So can you imagine the immense mass of unified power that we have? Unfortunately, we are not unified by virtue of these broken languages that we have. And the third one is, the element that binds us all is language. Is language. So if this manifestation of calligraphy in whatever language that we have, it is just merely a myriad of colors, It's amazing to see the Kufi. It's amazing to see the Quran in the Warash script. I liked it. It's beautiful, really. Then you see the Diwani, then you see the Nasta'alik. But the language of it all is Arabic, and that's the mother language. Just like Latin is the mother language of all other Romance languages, but we do not develop a sense of Arabic as the mother language. So this is fascinating. Now, why perhaps I think artists do not write meanings to their work? It's just to create a sense of longing. When you see something, a form that does not give itself immediately to you, it will incite upon you, I want to know more. And it's a sense of longing. And that is why, even for someone who doesn't understand Arabic, when he reads or she reads the Quran, it brings the attachment even stronger and stronger and closer and closer. Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we have another 7 minutes for our discussion. We can continue discussion. Yeah, please.
No, I was just going to go on to that. Essentially, it's a discussion about identity and pride, as Elsie mentioned. So it's very much linked to who you are. But the most beautiful thing is you've got almost a blank slate in front of you, but with huge amount of heritage behind you. And so you can develop almost anything. Don't wait for somebody else from the outside to come and do it, because I'll come and do it, right? But the point being is, that's the beauty in it. I find that there is so much potential just waiting to be untapped, and it can be in a, you could do a hip hop graph style, Jawi script. Why not? You could do something very digital and fun and funky and cool and different tools and methods. But the point being is, somebody needs to start, and I just want to see young Malaysians, begin to explore that and introduce that. I mean, someone was saying, "Oh, why do we need to bring back Jawi script?" I said, and we don't relate to it, right? But then you didn't have Latin, romanization script very long ago. You had the Arabic script far longer, right, than the Latin. So if you're going to adopt the Latin, why not? You return back to your roots and actually say, well, we can have JavaScript as well. And I'm glad that they introduced it back into the school system as a language, as a a script form that people can write. And hopefully that helps revive that as well.
Thank you very much.
I have some points just to instigate your desire to learn Jawi. There are two techniques that you should know to read Jawi. The fundamental one, you have to know how to read the Quran. That's easy. The first one is you must know there are additional characters in JavaScript. There are 5. Pa sound, pa, it is based on the fa, pa, nga, based on the ghain, ga sound, based on the kaf with the 1 dot on top of it, cha, same like jim, but 3 dots, and nya, thank you, Prof. Nya is known with 3 dots. That's the additional letters in Jawi. The second one, the Jawi script is not based on harakat. It's based on the harfun illah. So if you want to vocalize the Jawi consonant, you must look for the alif, waw, or ya to make the sound a, I, u. So you can try by yourself to look at our exhibition over there and try to read by yourself the JavaScript.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, what you mentioned about the fact that we were totally disconnected, and sometimes the interest in the Arabic language is coming from people not connected to Arabic in any way. And there was a book a few years ago, in 2010, that was launched called Arabic Graffiti. And the sad thing about it is most of them, most of the artists featured in the book, were people who don't even read or write Arabic. They just write in Latin, but shaping the letter in Arabic, and it just show you the fact that we were totally disconnected. And just a little story that I experienced a few years ago in Saudi. I went there for the first time, I think 2009 or 10, and then I met some young street artists over there, and they were just writing the same way you write in New York or LA, and I asked them, so why are you writing in English? Why don't you, when you're born in Saudi, they were from Jeddah, why don't you write in Arabic? And they were it doesn't exist. There is no Arabic graffiti. It doesn't exist. And I'm yes, it exists. You need to create it. You need to, the same thing. Some kids, in New York, they did it in the 70s. They created something out of a social call. I think they should, we should find why we want to create this, and this is really important, because that's the only way we can still carry a tradition. Otherwise, in a few years, nobody will speak about Jawi, and we're gonna just lose it.
Thank you very much. Okay, I have maybe one question, very short, and one answer, okay?
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Neda. I'm from Germany. I'm a very new by calligraphy artist, and I would like to ask you what you could recommend a calligraphy artist from Germany who likes to build bridges through the artwork to a non-Muslim society, because I think it's very important to build that bridges. So I'm very keen about to know what you could recommend in our artwork, what we could give back to our society we are living in. This will be very interesting. there. Thank you.
Sorry, just quick point. Is there any like web resources for the students that they can go to learn about Jawi? If you could also mention that, that'd be great.
There's another gentleman at the back. No, that's it, yeah, the T-shirt, yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then another one. We just collect the questions and then we answer.
Okay. Well, thank you all for such an incredibly enriching panel. This is something I think we should have been discussing every day here. I just have two questions. Sorry, I came in just a little bit late during your presentation, so I wasn't sure if this was discussed. Was there a script that was used here prior to the Jawi script? And is that something that maybe influenced the way the Jawi was written? And then the second is, given the incredible rich mix of cultures and languages and religions that exists here, and seeing English as some sort of commonality to kind of help bridge them, is there any sort of, I don't know, thoughts or discussion about reincorporating Jawi, but at the same time still, being able to maintain this balance and not kind of, I don't know, hindering that, yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. Mine's just a comment. The British government introduced the £2 coin. And the very first time when they introduced it, on the edge of the coin, they wrote, "Standing on the shoulders of giants."
By the way, the oldest, known fragments of the Quran happen to be in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, Birmingham.
In Birmingham. So, yeah, they're collecting and they're taking our heritage. Well, I am anyway, in the UK.
Okay, please, who can answer questions, please?
Yeah, at
You
the
have
moment,
little bit
the one who championing the Jawi in the terms of computer technology is Dewan Bahasa, the National Institute of Language of Malaysia. You can look into their website. They are doing the interlinear transliteration with the Malay script, English, and the Jawi form of the words.
Somebody about contribution to the society. It was our first question.
Yeah, from Neda Kuba. Yuan, okay, I heard about
German,
you.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, how can I explain that? Like, create bridges, people most of the time, like, mainly in Europe or in the US, they always have this wrong idea. When you paint in Arabic, people, they think that you are either writing a religious message or like maybe like a terrorist message. I used to say like don't worry, you can come close to the wall, it's not gonna explode on you. And so you need to push that. Even if you see like some wrong reaction from people, you're always gonna experience that. Even like in the Muslim country, like you go sometime. I painted like in Muslim country and people like just look so close-minded, so they don't understand why you paint on walls. But you, no matter what you're gonna face, you just need to keep it up. And me, I remember I was painting once in France, and I used a quote from a French writer called Baudelaire. And a few years later, like this old woman came and she said, like, "We know what you wrote. You wrote some. We managed to decipher what you write on the wall, and you wrote some satanic verse." I'm like, where you go get this? Like, so you're always gonna have like some stupid people, but it's cool, to meet them, because then you have like story to tell when you like a conference like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have to comment about whether there's an earlier language before this. Yes, there were. It's a Sanskrit-based language. It's called the Palawa or Pali, and there are many versions of it as it travels around the Malay world. Javanese called Rencong and what have you. So, but it died out, and that's fascinating because as the Muslim in this part of the world, or the Malays embrace Islam, they embrace a new language, and this is a fascinating thing about the aspect of Islam. Islam, as it spread out from the lands of Arabia, it went to Persia, and then it developed a new language. It's called Modern Persian. It's Farsi. Previously, it's known as Pahlavi, the language of Persia. But then it developed the Persian script, which is now symbolized as the Nasta'liq form. And the Nasta'liq form came down to the subcontinent. You have Urdu. So you have Urdu, a mix of language, local Hindi, Tamil, Sanskrit, with Arabic and Persian. And it came down to this part of the world. That's why we have Hindi, Tamil, Arabic, Persian, and Malay.
And the same way it goes down to Egypt, but it maintained the Arabicness, which is quite interesting. Arabic in Egypt, or I should say the reverse, Egypt before Islam came was not Arab. Not a single Egyptian was Arab before Islam. And suddenly now Egypt is the seat of Sunni Islam. The same thing in Sudan, it was black Africa. Then Islam came, bring with it Arabic, bring with it Islam, and now Sudan is an Arab country. Palestine, fascinating too. But Turkey, Islam went to Turkey, the Turkish took Arabic script, it developed the Osmanlı language. So this is something which is quite unique. Islam somehow resurfaces and gives us a new identity, gives us a new language, and this idea of unifying using language, history, and religion, we have the whole of it. 3 out of 4, man. The bet is good, isn't it? 3 out of 4. Thank you.
Can I just ask one final question that I can answer it quickly? Sorry, I think Omar, right? So he mentioned something really interesting. Because off the back of what you're saying, it would be amazing to see a JavaScript that combines multiple different languages, influences, cultural influence. So I would maybe it's JavaScript written in a Chinese brush, rather than a reed pen. Maybe something like that needs to come through. Maybe it's the Chinese community that write in Jawi in a particular style. I mean, that's a fascinating question and fascinating topic to discuss for another time, but I would love to see that development, and because that's what makes it really uniquely Malaysian in here.
Thank you very much. I think it's time already to finish. Yeah. And anyway, thank you to everybody. I think we reach our purpose, our big target. We take attention to the JavaScript, and we make all of you to be interesting and encourage you to learn more about JavaScript. And this one will help us to revive this script. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Look, I think you would all agree that this esteemed panel has brought such a richness and a depth to a conversation. When we talk about script, we talk about heritage, we talk about culture, we talk about identity. And when you talk about the historic to the modern, that fusion and that chronology is a fascinating thing, and it kind of makes us realize that we all have links, we all have histories and pasts which help us tell our stories. So thank you so much for that. And I'd like to officially acknowledge our esteemed panel, Professor Dr. Mohammed Zaini Othman, Mohammed Shukri, Ruh Al-Alam, El-Cid, and of course Professor Dr. Tatiana Denisova, our moderator. Thank you all for your fabulous conversations and really enriching us. It's a steep learning curve for all of us, and having experts here to learn from is a great blessing. We are going to finish this session, but in about 20 minutes, I'm asking you all to stay, hang around, look through the shops and the souk, because we're going to be reconvening at midday for an in-depth conversation with El-Cid and Asad Al-Jafri, who's a cultural producer. That's going to be a classic interaction and dialogue, specifically about the past to the present and how cultural fusion forms contemporary identity. It's going to be an amazing session. Please don't miss out. Don't make me lock you in. I won't close the doors, but if you promise to be back here by midday, I promise you an incredible session. So stick around for that. That will be the last event for MOCAfest, and it will end with a bang. Okay, so stick around. Thank you.